All right, so state, you're seeking to offer this witness as an expert.
Yes, Judge, in EDR extraction analysis as well as crash mathematics and collision reconstruction.
All right, and defense, you wanted to take the witness on voir dire.
Yes, Your Honor, please.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant Davis, my name is David McLean, and I represent Robert Castillo. If I ask a bad question or you don't understand a question that I've asked, would you please just let me know? I'm happy to rephrase that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And also, if you answer a question of mine, is it safe to assume that you understood my question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so when were you trained in EDR extraction?
I don't remember the date. I want to say it was 2016 or 2017.
And for the record, what does EDR stand for?
EDR in this case is the event data recorder. Some other manufacturers call it an electronic control device. Others call it the ACM, airbag control module, PCM, power control module. Like I said, it's just different for every manufacturer.
But they're all synonymous.
Correct. Yes.
All right. And so you did the. Let me go back a little bit. So you also said that you were certified in crash math. What is crash math?
So crash math is part of the reconstruction process. There's certain steps and certain classes you have to go through to be able to reconstruct a crash. So obviously we get the basics for crash investigations in the academy. Once you promote, there's intermediate crash investigation, advanced crash investigation, and then the reconstruction investigation. And then I ended up having another class, which is called crush analysis.
So did you go through all that training?
Yes.
When did you do that?
That was from the time I promoted through, I think, 2018, somewhere in there.
What was the time you promoted?
2016, February of 2016.
2016 through. So it took you about 2 years to get through that training?
I believe so, because they kept pushing. Those courses aren't offered all the time, so they kept getting pushed back and pushed back. And then you have to have enough students from across the state coming to attend those, or else they cancel them.
And do you get some sort of certification from that?
Yes, you get a certificate showing that for the hours that you attained for the class and that you passed the class.
How many hours is all that training?
I believe the intermediate is 40 hours. Advanced, I believe, is 40 or 80. I can't remember. And then the reconstruction is 80. And then crush is 40. The CDR analysis. So there's one on how to use the software or how to perform the download, and then there's another class on how to analyze the data. And I think those two combined is probably just under a week, something like that.
And so, back up just a little bit. The crush course was how long?
I want to say that was a week, maybe 40 hours, just a little less.
And what does CDR stand for?
The controlled data retrieval.
Okay. And how long did, and that was 2 parts you said, how to perform and how to analyze?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
so there's how to perform it, like hook up all the equipment, how to run everything. And then there's a separate class on once you get the data, how to interpret the data.
Okay. And did you take the class on how to interpret the data?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When did you take that?
I'm not sure on the date. That may have been 2017, 2018.
Somewhere, anywhere from around 8 or 9 years ago, correct?
Probably, yeah.
Have you had any kind of continuing education in all these areas, the intermediate, the advanced, the control data retrieval, how to analyze it, how to perform it? Have you had any kind of continuing education in these areas since
No.
then?
Not since the initial training.
Are you working in the same division now that you were when you were doing this kind of work?
No. Now I'm assigned to patrol.
Back on patrol?
Yes, sir.
What happens when you make sergeant, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem fair. um, on when was the last time that you did a EDR extraction?
Probably towards the end of 2023, right before I promoted. This may have been the last one that I did. I don't recall.
How many EDR extractions do you think you've done?
Extractions, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go back and count them. I don't know, maybe less than 100, maybe around in there. I don't know.
On each EDR extraction that you've done, did you do an analysis of that, or did you just pull the data and let somebody else look at it?
So it depends. Sometimes I would pull the data or retrieve it for another detective or help them do it. I did my own if I could. And then you have to do an analysis on that. But in some cases, I would do the analysis for the other detectives. So it just kind of depends.
You know when the last time you did an analysis was?
It would have been towards the end of 2023, right before I promoted.
Sergeant, thank you for your time. I appreciate you answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any objection to this witness being declared as an expert?
Judge, I don't know that I declare him an expert. He hasn't had any continuing education since he took these classes back in 2018, almost 10 years. The last time he did an extraction at all was 2023, so this might have been the one. But I don't know that he's an expert. I think he's trained, but I don't know that he's an expert.
Well, my question is, do you have any objections to his testimony? The state is offering him as an expert. I'm assuming that you all are asking that he, well, I don't want to interject myself. Are you going to be asking him um, the details of the extraction and what it means?
The details of the extraction as well as the analysis, Judge.
All right. So are you objecting to this witness testifying to the details of the extraction and the analysis because they say that's what they're calling him for?
We would object, Judge, just because I don't believe there's been enough education or continuing education for him to be able to testify. The controlling case in this case is Trejo for state, and I think that basically there's got to be some showing of continuing education and being current on the extraction and analysis at the time that it's done. I don't think that was shown.
Well, nobody's asked the witness whether or not the education he obtained and the experience he obtained, whether or not there have been changes.
May I be allowed to voir dire on that subject, Judge?
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant Davis, you just heard the interchange between the court and myself and opposing counsel. Between the time that you finished your training in 2018 and 2023, when you said you probably did your last analysis, were there changes in these EDRs and ACMs that occurred?
As far as I know, no. The only changes that would apply would be the ability for us, provided by the manufacturer, to read or retrieve certain data. So in other words, the The computer chip in that airbag control module receives all kinds of data. The federal government, I think it was in 2013, mandated that certain data has to be available to us for investigations. But there's a whole bunch of other data that is provided to the manufacturer or recorded for the manufacturer that we don't get to see. So the software that's provided to us will only pull the data that the manufacturer allows us to have. Best case I can give you would be Lexus when they were getting sued about the accelerator pedal getting stuck, cars crashing and catching fire. Toyota recorded all kinds of data that nobody knew that they recorded. And that saved them from billions in a lawsuit for that. So they ended up proving that that wasn't the case. So the only changes would be what manufacturers are going to allow us to get that data. There had been a change in the hardware that's used. They went from one control box that we use to another control box where instead of using our old cables, you could actually just plug it in with an HDMI. So sometimes there's a hardware upgrade. The software upgrade would include anything that's current for the manufacturers, and that gets updated yearly. The department has to get those new certifications. They'll have to order new cables. Every time a new car comes out, there may be a new cable that's applied to that. So, for example, if a 2027 model's out, we may not have that cable yet because the manufacturer hasn't made it available. So there's a few changes like that, but as far as I know, that's about all the changes.
And would you agree with me in 2018, Tesla motor vehicles weren't nearly as prevalent as they are now, or were in 2023?
You mean as far as the number of vehicles on the street?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that.
And when you did your training in 2018, did they train you how to read Tesla's EDRs?
So the training that you get is on how to read any of the data that you get from the retrieval. And data is pretty much the same. It's just going to depend on the manufacturer. So when you pull the data, there's going to be what's called the data limitations, which basically gives you a definition of what the manufacturer is going to define everything as in the data. But as far as the way that the data is presented or how to interpret that, it's pretty much the same across all manufacturers. It's just going to be a difference in how they record it. Like some would say vehicle speed, some are going to say speed. Some are going to say braking input, some are just going to say braking. So it just depends on how they put that in the data limitations.
Would you agree with me, though, that at the time you took this training, Teslas weren't really being, you weren't doing downloads and things on Teslas?
As far as I know, we hadn't done anything back then, correct?
And since that time, you haven't had any training on any of these changes. It's just been sort of something that you've done OJT.
The only update that we had was when we when the manufacturer for the hardware, Bosch, they changed from one control module to another as far as how we download. So depending on the year of the vehicle, we would have to use the newer module versus the older module. That was really the only difference. The software gets updated from time to time, but that's through the manufacturer for the software, which is Bosch.
Thank you, sir. I'll pass the books.
All right, any questions?
A few quick questions, Judge. So, Sergeant Davis, at the time, when was this infraction done?
I believe in 2023.
And were you up to date with your certification in 2023?
I was.
Okay, and that's your EDR certification?
Yes. It's the CDR. I forget what the first one's called. It's the CDR, basically how to use it for the retrieval, and then there's the CDR analysis.
You had all of your state certifications that were necessary for EDR extraction and analysis at the time that this was done.
I did.
Okay. And let's talk about, I think you were saying it was the crash class, which is it? Crush class.
Yeah, crush analysis.
Okay. What is that? What does that class entail?
So crush analysis would be, say for example, you have a collision. You can't retrieve any data out of the control module, whether it's damaged or it didn't have one, say like a 1980s Chevy. So with crush, you can then measure the amount of damage to that vehicle and compare it to a undamaged vehicle. You take multiple measurements and then you plug those measurements into its multiple math formulas to determine the amount of energy that caused that damage. And then you could, depending how accurate you get it, you could then determine what kind of speed was involved for that.
So it sounds like, in a quick and dirty way of saying it, it sounds like crash math.
Sort of. It's a way of doing it based on the damage to the vehicle alone. Crash math, as we define it, would be where we're taking roadway evidence such as skid marks, any kind of tire marks, things like that, and then inputting that into the math formulas to determine any type of speed.
Okay, I got you. All right. And we'll pass the witness, Judge.
Any further questions?
Briefly, Judge. So you said that you take these measurements and you put them into these formulas. Are you doing the math on these formulas, or is this a computer program?
So you have to do it both ways. There are computer formulas to do it, especially with crush analysis. When that first started, you had to do the hand math. Nowadays, they have multiple programs where you can take all those measurements and put it in, and it basically spits out the answer. But you still have to go back and do the hand math to verify that that's correct. So relying on computer to do it is kind of a no-no. So you kind of got to do it both ways, unfortunately.
So back in 2023, when you did this last analysis that you're talking about, were you doing that by hand, or were you doing that by computer, or both, or how were you doing it?
So are we talking about, because I didn't do any crush for this case.
Okay.
And I didn't do any reconstruction math for this case at all. It's just based off the data that was in the control module.
Let me ask you this real quick, and it may not apply to this case, but are you an accident reconstructionist or a collision accident reconstructionist, or what's the difference?
So I'm a reconstruction. So you have to go through all of those steps to do accident reconstruction, which is what I was saying, where you take roadway evidence and things like that, you plug them into the standard math formulas to determine speed. And then crush, same thing. You're doing differences in damage, I guess you could say, from an undamaged vehicle to a damaged vehicle, multiple points, plugging that into a math formula to determine the amount of energy that caused that damage, which would result in a speed. And then with the CDR analysis, you're just taking the data that is retrieved from the control module and analyzing that data.
Okay. So, as you sit here today, are you an accident reconstructionist?
I am.
All right, any further questions?
Nothing further, Judge.
All right, can you line the jurors up? All right, do you have any objections to this witness testifying, defense?
Judge, I reurge the same objection that I had before. It appears to me that there have been changes since his training. He testified that Tesla motor vehicles weren't even really on their radar at all at the time that he got his training done. There hasn't really been any continuing education since then. And so we would reurge our objection to him being classified as an expert.
All right, state.
Judge, we would argue against that. He stated that the data does not change, and the way that you interpret the data does not change. It basically is a different category as opposed to braking input versus brakes, speed versus miles per hour. And he's also stated that he was up to date with all of his certifications with EDR extraction and analysis, as well as accident reconstruction. Because of that, Judge, we would ask that he be certified as an expert of EDR extraction and analysis, as well as accident reconstruction.
All right, the witness will be allowed to testify as an expert in the extraction, and I believe you said ED.
EDR extraction and analysis, as well as accident reconstruction.
All right, he'll be allowed to testify.